The wind at Donner Pass never arrives alone. It brings the thin whistle that lives in the pines and the thud of powder sliding off granite, and in February of 1952, it wrapped both sounds around a black sedan inching up the old lanes of US 40. Inside were William and Patricia Hargrove, married 3 months and running on coffee, chains, and optimism. They had planned a small escape to Reno if they could slip over the summit before night. The forecast said flurries. The mountain said otherwise. Waiting is a reasonable plan until the storm stops being weather and becomes geography. The wind stacked snow behind bumpers and under chassis. Drifts grew fanged lips that bit up over doors. William took a glove and crawled out to kick clear the exhaust. Patricia cracked the window and pulled the blanket higher. They traded sips from the thermos, rewound a wristwatch out of habit, and talked the way new spouses do when nothing is happening and everything is. Somewhere after dark, the world outside the windshield turned to a single color. The plows that had roared past were gone, the taillights they followed disappeared, and the road narrowed to a white idea. They eased onto a side spur that promised shelter from the wind and found only deeper quiet. Snow moved like a living thing, building the car a low white wall. When the storm finally broke 3 days later, crews began carving a highway out of sculpted silence. On March 3rd, a section gang from the railroad noticed the glint of chrome in a mound that should have been all snow and walked over with shovels. Under a lid of ice as clear as old glass, the sedan waded nose to the trees on a side road barely wide enough for 2 axles. They chipped, pried, and forced the passenger door because the lee side would surrender first, and the cold exhaled as the seal broke. Inside lay a small, private world preserved by temperature and time. William and Patricia were on the front bench, pulled close, arms around each other in a posture that suggested neither panic nor surrender, so much as a bargain with the last heat they owned. Frost had stitched their lashes, the blanket was tucked to their chins. The heater was set to high, the choke was out. The fuel needle quivered near empty. On the dash were 2 wristwatches, side by side. Both stopped. His at 10:14 p.m., hers at 8:23 p.m. A day apart, as if time had staggered and could not quite agree on when to quit. No broken glass. No footprints outside the doors. Only the hush that follows a decision the body makes without asking the mind. The coroner's steps moved like a measured hand. Carbon monoxide leaves few marks but a tidy trail. Snow buried the tailpipe. The idling engine pushed its exhaust back through imperfect seams, and the warm, sweet gas filled the cabin with an ease that did not bruise or shout. Drowsiness slid into sleep, sleep into stillness. The engine sputtered and died. The temperature inside fell like a lifted lid. There were no scuffs on the panels, no shattered safety glass, no sign of struggle. The watches were trickier, oils thicken, seals admit breath. He may have rewound his out of habit while checking the time between gusts. Or hers, wound tighter or sheltered better, ticked into the next night. The files could only write the times. The living would do the rest. Reporters arrived to meet a story that carried both mercy and dread. The winter had already become legend. A streamliner trapped under the summit like a bright creature in white amber. Lodges turned into islands, rotaries throwing plumes taller than houses. The Hargroves fit the ledger. Papers ran photographs of a door wedged open, of men crouching by the car with their hats in their hands, of the ice shell broken back to a curve that could only be human. What the pictures could not carry was the sound the wind makes at the pass in the hour after a storm, the long, glassy tone that turns distance into a wall. Family came, signed where lines asked for names, and took what could be taken. In a heated garage, the coroner's people thawed the vehicle the way you open a letter you do not want to read, carefully, at the seams, catching the melt in trays so it would not smear what remained. Wedding bands slid free without a fight. A letter they had meant to mail in Reno mentioned the pines and the glitter of snow on the cut banks. There was no farewell for anyone. The last words were their posture. Around the pass, the story took the shape locals give their warnings. Donner keeps its famous ghosts, the emigrant party, the hunger, but most of the mountain's lessons are quiet. Ski patrollers told rookies to clear tailpipes twice, and then once again. Tow drivers kept clocks in their trucks because time lies in whiteouts. Plow crews said that in heavy years, at dusk, you can look up toward the old road and imagine you see two figures a little off the shoulder, so close together the wind can't find skin between them, and when your blade throws light their way, the shapes flatten back into shadow. Belief is optional. Caution is not. The watches would not stop talking. People argued the hours the way spectators argue a game they did not watch. Mechanics sided with oils and escapements. Romantics chose the reading that he lasted long enough to feel her head go light, and then found a day more in his body to keep the embrace honest. The files, which only know how to be sober, wrote the times without gloss. The families, who are allowed to be otherwise, chose mercy and kept it. They were buried side by side in Sacramento under granite that catches sun in summer and frost in winter. Their stone offers names and a month and a year and leaves the rest to the wind over the Sierra. Drivers still cross the pass with better tires and brutal warnings printed on bright metal about exhaust and snow. Trains still duck into their snow sheds and come out the far end like ships from fog. On certain afternoons, when clouds lay their bellies on the ridge and the pine tops thresh in invisible waves, the road grows narrow again in the minds of those who know its temper. You can almost feel a glove on a cold bumper, knocking ice from a pipe. If there is instruction here, it is not a sententious one. Cold does not announce itself with ceremony. It accumulates in inches and minutes and habits. A safe hour becomes a questionable one, becomes a last one, and you only learn which is which when you have stepped over the line. The machines we trust are faithful right up until the moment they are not. After that, only the small rituals remain, the reach for a hand in the dark, the blanket pulled higher, the watch wound because that is what you do when everything else has been taken away. Stand by the summit in a blow and listen to what the pines say when a gust threads the needles. It is not language, but the ear wants to make it so. It tells you to keep moving, to check the pipe again, to crack the window and trust the sting of air. It also tells stories whether you ask or not. One of them belongs to William and Patricia, whose car turned into a glass reliquary for a few blue hours and then into a caution folded back into the drift. Their watches did not agree, but their final posture did, and sometimes that is the only testimony the weather leaves behind. That winter remade the maps in people's heads. Highway crews painted new warning boards and hammered them into posts at pullouts that had swallowed sedans. Service stations kept flyers by the register about tailpipes and sleepiness that is not fatigue. A year later, a trooper pulled over to help a couple idling on a blue star night and found the drift already mouth-high around their bumper. He cleared it with his boot and told them a story without names. They turned off the heater and shivered and lived. The mountain kept its habits. In spring, the drifts sagged and caved. In summer, the granite warmed and smelled faintly of dust and pine sap. In autumn, the first powder came like a rumor. You could stand on the shoulder where the logging spur meets the old highway, and if you were patient, watch weather build its case from innocent white to the kind that erases shapes. It took what inattention offered and left the rest to memory. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.